Greetings from West Lafayette, Indiana. Student life creates a dynamic out-of-classroom experience at Purdue University. Dedicated professionals in student life help Boilermakers find their campus home. We work tirelessly to support students and to help them pursue their dreams. Our work brings together housing, activities, arts, people, programs, and more to create a vibrant residential campus experience. In student life, our Parent and Family Connections area is Purdue's critical point of contact for our families. Our team provides parents and families with information, resources, tools, and more. We recognize that families are a key part of student success, and we are excited to engage families as partners throughout their Boilermakers educational journey. Hail Purdue!
First off, I want to give you all a big shout out. Congratulations. You made it through the summer, and most of you have now moved your Boilermaker into West Lafayette. This time of year is my absolute favorite time to be around campus. There's so much excitement with band camp and BGR activities, and so many new experiences for our new Boilermakers just around the corner. My name is Jen Wetley, and I want to thank so many of you for stopping by our tables during the BGR check-in to say hi, give high fives, handshakes, and even a couple of selfies. I'm truly humbled by all of you, and I'm so happy to have been a part of your transition to Purdue. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Beth McCuskey for an introduction on Steps to Leaps, a framework we first brought to you in one of our onboard newsletter messages this summer and will continue to reference throughout our virtual events moving forward.
Thanks so much, Jen. It's just great to be here tonight and join our families as we talk about the Purdue experience. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about well-being and how do we approach this at Purdue. President Mung Chiang began his term in January, and one of the first things he did was launch an effort into looking at well-being holistically and how do we support students on our campus. And this totally tied into the things we were doing in the division and even emphasized them further. I know as a parent, when my own kids went to school, it's a phenomenal time, right? They're creating their own independence, they're launching. It's also just very nerve-wracking, right? They're going away for the first time, and how do you navigate that? And I think our initiative that we have in place here in student life and at Purdue as a whole can really help kind of allay some of those fears, as well as help with toolkits that students and families can use as they launch their journey. We have a model here at Purdue, a framework called Steps to Leaps. Steps to Leaps started in the mid-teens. We started talking to students and we realized that their needs were a little different than the generation who had come before them. And so we worked together with our student government, with my advisory council students, and identified a new way to support them, really tying in through research the key things that really make a difference to well-being. And so we launched this initiative in the fall of 2019 and have had a lot of success with it. Again, this is a framework. And so we have 5 different pillars that we talk about as part of this framework. And we have just a lot of effort across campus, embracing these pillars and using them in a variety of different places, including in the classroom and clubs and organizations. Even in our division, it's part of our staff performance review in terms of how they're working with these different pillars for themselves and their units and their communities, but also as they're supporting students. So the 5 pillars begin with well-being, and we see well-being as kind of that top pillar, the one that kind of is the umbrella of everything else. Well-being to us means flourishing, and so we look holistically at how students flourish. And well-being is one of those things that's partly ourselves and how we respond to all the things going on in our lives, but it's also the support structures and the networks and the pieces and parts that we have here on campus that support our students. So again, it's an individual effort. It's also our community and how do we reach out and how do we support our students. The second one of our pillars is leadership. We have an amazing leadership center named after Roger Stewart, who was one of our great leaders and came back and gave back in many, many ways and still does to support our students. And with leadership, yes, there's all the opportunities to be, leading student organizations or leading your group in your group project or leading amazing initiatives that our students launch every year. But leadership also means, and how we define it for Steps to Leaps, is how do you reinvest in yourself? We are all unfinished beings, right? We have so much that we can continue to learn, continue to grow, and we want our students to realize that leadership is about just that, right? That investment in yourself and realizing it's time to tackle some new things. It's time to learn some new things. What's next for me, and how do I navigate to get there, and what pieces and parts do I need to be better? And so we want to instill in our students this sense of professional development, or this sense of continually striving to do better, be better, learn more throughout their lives, not just here at Purdue. Impact is a huge one. That's our third pillar, and that is one that this generation of students told us definitively was so important to them. Our students want to make a difference in the world, and they want the tools and the skill sets to do so. And so we try to help our students recognize that Neil Armstrong did not wake up one day and walk on the moon. There were so many elements in his own journey that he, built out to be able to have those amazing impacts. Also, not every one of us is going to walk on the moon, right? So, what is our individual contribution in our own lives, and how can Purdue help you get there? The other thing with impact that's important, we know that these big dreams are so crucial, and how do we foster them? But we also know that sometimes they can be overwhelming. And so, how do we help our students recognize that you can chunk these things out and you can do little things every day? And sometimes impact is just something tiny, like doing something nice for somebody that really makes a difference for them and for us. The next item is networks. The network pillar is really, it's so powerful because it's about that social dynamic. We know that students who are most networked, or people who are most networked, are more resilient and they are more successful. And so what does a network mean? It means having people that have your back. It means connecting through a variety of different settings. It might be faculty, it might be people from your church, it might be fellow students, it might be our families. All of these people matter and contribute to who we are and our fabric. I like to think of networks as a tapestry, and we want lots of vibrant, different colors and textures and ways of looking, so that we have this rich sense of people that are part of our community. Being in a network also means that we give back to that network, and we can't forget that piece either. How do we give back to people who need us? That's an important part of the social dynamic. And then finally, our last pillar is grit or persistence. Grit is really about overcoming failure. It's recognizing that the most successful people take risks, take calculated risks, and sometimes when you take risks, you fall flat on your face, and that's okay. It's not that you fell flat on your face, it's what you do with it when you get back up, right? And so we want our students to be brave and be bold and to try new things. We also want them to know we have their back as they make those mistakes. And what do you learn from them is often more important than making this mistake as a whole. Steps to Leaps is obviously riffing off of that very important contribution from our very important alumni, Neil Armstrong. We know that those leaps that are taken in life are the journey culminated by multiple steps along the way. And so we want our students to leave here kind of with that understanding. I know that there's a lot here to think about. We have launched a brand new website, and I'd like to encourage you to take a peek at all that we have out there. Also like to encourage you to talk to your student about these pillars. Honestly, I use these pillars in my daily life, and I believe anybody can. It's not just for our students. Thanks again for having me this evening. I am just thrilled to welcome you to the Purdue community. It is just wonderful to kick off the year. Hail Purdue, and back to you, Jen.
Thank you, Beth. Now it is my honor to introduce our special guest for this broadcast. I first met Lisa at a conference back in 2019 during her presentation about creating an online community for parents. After following their Facebook group for so long, I truly felt like I was meeting a celebrity. So I'm so excited for them to join us today. Lisa Hefner, sorry about that, and Mary Dell are co-founders of Grown and Flown. They're writers, moms, and friends. They created Grown and Flown when each of their youngest was in high school and their oldest were in college. It has become the #1 site for parents with teens and college students, reaching millions of parents every month. In their past incarnations, Mary Dell worked in television and media, and Lisa had a career that included Wall Street, politics, and writing. Lisa is a New York Times bestselling author whose books include Goldman Sachs, The Culture of Success. I'd like to introduce you to Mary Dell.
Thank you so much, Jen. And we are so thrilled to be here today to talk to all of you. We want to thank the Parent and Family Connections and Orientation Program for hosting this event and including us. We are thrilled to be speaking to you as your family is making this transition and your teens begin their journey at Purdue. We know you have just had drop off, and we know this is a huge moment for your families. We have been in your shoes and understand what that moment feels like, and it's something that you take with you always, and your child will too. A little bit of time about Grown and Flown. As Jen said, Lisa and I began Grown and Flown after our eldest sons were in college and felt that there really were not many resources for families at this important stage of life. We hope that our site and our community can be that resource for you going forward. This is truly one of life's bittersweet moments and milestones when your teen leaves for college. We're going to start tonight discussing the transition from high school to college and what we see some of the things that families wish they had known when they were in your shoes. We're going to touch on what you might expect from your freshmen and how you can be supportive but not intrusive. And finally, how you can help your teen find the resources they may need here at Purdue. We're going to talk for around 30 minutes and then answer some of your questions. So first, let me start with the transition from high school to college. It can really be challenging for some students, especially after they've been hearing for the last few months, if not the last few years, that college is the best 4 years of your life. Once you get to college, it can kind of feel like a letdown. So I think it's important to push back a little bit on this myth. Yes, we know that college can be incredible. And yes, these years loom large in our own memories as places where we became adults, where we made some of our best friends in life, including possibly finding our partners. We created some of the most enduring relationships that we still enjoy today. However, if we start by setting more realistic expectations about college, this can be a great first step in helping your teen transition. There will definitely be wonderful times in college, but there will also be low moments. Leaving every single person you know in life, including your dog, perhaps, to come to a place where you may not know a single soul would be daunting, especially at 18. But if students are prepared and they expect that it's normal to feel uncomfortable and not know anyone and feel stressed, then it may take the temperature down a little bit when they have that feeling. If we encourage them to let go of this myth of these 4 great years and adapt a more realistic view of their time in college, I think it can help them cope with any uncomfortableness that they may be feeling or that they may feel in the coming weeks. So what are the challenges that they are likely to face when they come to school? We see 4 ones that we want to talk about tonight. The first is academics. A very wise professor told us these 3 tips for your students to take advantage of from day one. Now, the first may seem obvious: go to class. Students should attend class every day, even when the notes and lectures are published online. It will allow your student to develop a relationship with their professor, which is key to not only academic success, but as well to developing this sense of belonging in the Purdue community. The second, from her view at the front of the classroom, she urges your student to find a seat up front, not to sit way in the back. It's much easier to remain engaged with what the professor is saying and to connect both with the material and with the professor. And third is office hours. Your teen should go to office hours not just once, but often through the term. Take a draft of their essay to their TA or professor for review. Once graded work comes back, go back and review it again. These are things that may feel uncomfortable and not that intuitive compared to what their experiences were in high school. But from an academic standpoint, this will help them transition from being a high school student to a college kid. Now, in terms of time management, in high school, your students' time was really carefully structured by you, their parents, and the school. They went to class at regular times. Their extracurriculars were all planned out. Their meals may have been served sometime around the same time of day. The house got quiet and dark around the same time at night. But now at college, this is no longer the case. Almost everything is really up to them to schedule, with the exception of their schoolwork. So the academic lives may have fewer but longer term assignments. There's no one to tell them to get up in the morning, which I know is kind of a terrifying thought for a lot of us as we think about how hard it was to get our own kids out of bed. And if they didn't develop good time management in high school, which is, by the way, quite common, it may begin to show pretty quickly. So adults, time management is something that we do on a daily basis, and for us, it's very intuitive. But it is a place that we can help our new college students work through any of the challenges they may face. Perhaps there's a way they can keep track of their assignments. Maybe they can't really manage on their phone as well as they used to. There are a number of paper planners that are specifically made for college students. And even though it's kind of old school, we hear that actually there's great success with students really actually mapping out and seeing all in one place what they have to do every week. This will most likely be a series of conversations that you have with the teen over time, when you listen to their struggles and offer examples of potential solutions. Many college students learn some really tough lessons about time management, hence the old famous all-nighters that they may face. But this is a real teaching opportunity where parents can help their students without lecturing them, but with just some sound advice. As adults, we know the ability to manage projects, and time is an essential skill for that. So this is an investment in their future to get this right. The third challenge is asking for help. We discussed the importance of your student meeting with a professor and or a TA, and that's a great place for academic advice. But there are also tons of resources that Jen will talk about later in this talk where you can hear more about and learn more about. And these will be wonderful for you, your student, to tap in when they need help.
When they get to college, or when they're already there now, is something that's extremely common, and that's, of course, homesick. It's another challenge we commonly see when kids go off to college. One day you may get a call from your freshman that sounds like, "I hate it here, I want to go home." Or they may have been looking at social media of their high school friends and call you and say something like, "I hate it here, I need to transfer." Homesickness can be very painful for them, and for us to hear their pain can be also painful. And from the parents' point of view, there's a couple things we think you can do if this happens. First and foremost, and we really can't stress this enough, remind yourself and then remind them that this is not only common, it's actually typical. I'm going to throw a few stats at you here. UCLA has been surveying freshmen for over 50 years. They have surveyed over 15 million students from 2,000 colleges. And we don't want to throw a lot of numbers at you, but we think this one's really important. The annual UCLA survey showed that almost 3/4 of students, it was 72%, reported that they occasionally or frequently felt lonely or homesick, and that over half, it was 57%, said that they occasionally and frequently felt isolated from campus life. So if your student is feeling isolated or homesick or alone, they are in the majority of freshmen having this experience at some point in their first year. It doesn't mean it's not painful or that as parents we want to ignore it, but it does mean that it's a typical part of the experience, and they're more than likely to think that they're the only one experiencing it. So when we give them that reassurance that this is absolutely normal and even to be expected, it's extremely reassuring. So what can we do? Listening helps. Listening helps a lot. They may be calling home just to connect because they're feeling lonely, and you can just be on the other end of that call telling them that, what we just said, that it's typical, that it's normal, and that their connection to their campus, to new friends, and to activities will come over time. It's very hard. They want these things the first week. They want in the second week to have their group of friends. They want to be, full up and running in a very quick amount of time, and that's not always possible. So we need to continue to urge them to make these connections in activities with friends, with what's going on in campus, but to remind them that it may take some time. It's also helpful if we understand that dumping this sadness or this homesickness on us can actually be the solution. So Dr. Lisa D'Amour, who's a well-known clinical psychologist and a best-selling author, calls this dumping their emotional trash. And I love this expression. They call us up, they unburden us themselves with some sadness they feel or something that's bothering them. We're on the receiving end of this. We listen, and listening alone is sometimes the answer. We cannot tell you how many times a college student calls their parents in distress or tears over something. The parent worries all night. You call your teen the next morning and say, how are you doing? How's it going? And they say, what? I'm fine. What do you mean? I'm fine. So we have to remember that sometimes we don't need to throw a solution out there. Just listening to them is the solution, is what they needed. And so often we have to resist actually doing anything. And the other thing we can remind them is that homesick peaks and passes. It can get very acute. It can feel very bad at the moment that it's happening, but for many, many students, if not most students, it just dissipates over time. And what we've noticed in our community is that after Thanksgiving, when the students go back to college, they often feel more connected. They've made a few friends, they've thrown themselves into an activity, they know their classes a little, and that feelings of homesick begins to dissipate.
There really is an expectation of freshman year versus the reality of freshman year. And having your teen focus into the reality of freshman year definitely takes time. One of the most important things is establishing relationship. This is key to your teen transitioning to college. I think you can make suggestions to them about making friends and beginning to feel more comfortable at Purdue. These might not always be greeted with enthusiasm, but they will be heard. Some of the ways are for urging them to get involved in campus in almost any way. Urge them to get out of their dorm room, even if it's just to roam around campus. You want campus to become more familiar and comfortable place for them, and that won't happen if they're staying in their room. Remind them that what they're seeing on their friends' TikTok or Instagram feed is really a highly edited slice of life. Of course, they know that cognitively, but sometimes they need a little reminding. Also remind them that they need a constant. And this is a term that Lisa and I think about often. It's something that a recent college freshman or recent college sophomore described what made all the difference to her as she transitioned to college. It's that thing that comforts them, whether it's listening to Taylor Swift, whether it's going out for a run, having a coffee or a smoothie with a friend, or just chatting with their sibling back home. Something that really can support them emotionally. Their constant is what they need to seek out, especially when they're feeling a bit low. Remind them that the friends that they're missing so much from high school were one day strangers too. If things get worse, of course, urge them to speak to their RA or a therapist on campus. Purdue offers these resources for exactly this reason. And finally, a little care package goes a long way. Inside, there is the silver lining. You have raised a child in the love of your family. They have extended family, friends, and even pets that they're missing wildly. Missing these things at the core is not a terrible thing as long as it doesn't take over. A student who has loving, healthy connections in their lives comes to campus with something that's very important on the road to becoming an adult.
We want to talk also about communication with your student. One of the most common questions that we get is how much is too much or too little contact with my college freshman? Some parents despair because they never seem to hear from their new student, and others wonder if their kids are doing anything other than texting them and calling them. So if you're wondering how often to connect with your student, we're going to give you both a satisfying and an unsatisfying answer, and that is it depends. Again, I'm going to cite the UCLA data of the survey of freshmen that they've done for the last 50 years. They found that almost 85% of students communicated with their parents at least once a week. However, a third of students, it was 35%, interacted with their parents daily. That means that lots of kids are talking to their family once a week, which many of you may remember was pretty much the norm when we went to college. But a very substantial number of students is in contact with their family every single day, which is a new norm for this new era. Some of these connections may be a quick text or an emoji. When we say connect, it doesn't mean they're calling up and they're having a long phone call. My kids used to send me pictures of their food. Who knows? Maybe because I always asked them what they were eating. Some parents find that they send a quick goodnight to their kids, a little quick text at an evening because it's a pattern of a lifetime, and they've said goodnight to their kids every night for 18 years. And the kids respond back, and that's just works. We often hear parents talk about something called SOL. They want SOL, which is signs of life. When you haven't heard from them for a week or you haven't heard from them for 5 days, just a little text. I often say, I just text to my kids, all good, and they text back, all good. It's just a sign of life. So the contact needs to be what works for your family. The answer is truly whatever works for your family is the best possible solution, as long as that communication does not seem to be keeping your student from immersing themselves in their college life, so making their own decisions and moving forward to the next stage of their life.
You know, your students excelled in high school, or they would not be here at Purdue now. They may or may not have needed help academically. When they were sick, you probably made the call to get them to the doctor or manage other aspects of their life. Realizing that everybody needs help at some point and knowing how and when to get it is really one of the first steps to adulthood. So at some point, even the most able students probably need some academic help. And we've talked a little bit earlier about going to see your TA or professor during office hours. There are other academic resources that your teen can avail themselves of. They just have to reach out. While your inclination would be to find them that help, we know that old habits die really hard. Your first impulse needs to be asking them if they know how and where to get help, or who to ask if they don't know. Another crucial thing is taking care of themselves. This is the last transition we want to touch on, as your freshman is taking more and more responsibility for both their physical and mental health. They have never managed their health care before, either mental or physical. At home, parents are typically the ones making the decisions about what over-the-counter medicine works best for children when they have a cough or a cold, or if they need an analgesic. But now that your teens are in college, they need to know what to take if they are ill, why they're taking it, and when to take it. And this is a place where freshman year is really a teaching year. It's really a chance for the parents to pass the baton on to their teen, who is now going to be in charge of their own health care. But some of the other things to talk about is safety. Obviously, I'm sure you've already told them never to go out alone at night, especially the first few weeks of school. It's always a great idea to travel with friends, even if those friends are people you barely know, but are hallmates that you've just met. Also suggest these tips. Get physically oriented to campus during the daylight hours. Make sure their phones are charged before going out at night, and download the Purdue Safe Walk program number into their contacts on their phone. Talk about drinking. They will hear you. One study showed that students who spoke to their parents during the day drank less that day. It wasn't so much that you talked about drinking, it was just a reminder of family values and their parents. Talk about consent, friendship, and individual responsibility. When they brush you off, say it again. In the same way that your teen matured and became more independent over 4 years of high school, this will happen again over the next 4 years. What we expected from a 9th grader is so different than what we expected from a 12th grader. This same pattern repeats in college.
So that's some of what your teen may be going through and some of the ways that you may be helping them. We want to turn a little bit to what you might be going through. And some of the things you might be able to expect. Again, every student is different, every family is different. These are just some of the common threads that we see families experiencing in the first year of college. First, we can expect that our students will be experimenting with all sorts of things in their life, from their appearance to their interests to their beliefs. But even when they try on new things, even as they experiment with those things, that might feel a little uncomfortable to us, if it's blue hair or some piercings or different political or religious views than those that we hold, they very much need our encouragement and support. A couple of years ago, I interviewed Tom Dingman, and Tom Dingman was the dean of freshmen at Harvard for a very long time, and he had just retired when I interviewed him. I think he'd been there for decades. And he described it, he warned parents that your freshman might be trying out all sorts of different postures, different viewpoints, and that part of developing individually and figuring out who you are apart from the family. This is a process they need to go through, but he stressed, and I thought this was real wisdom we wanted to share with you. He stressed that it's vital that they continue to know that we support them and believe in them as they go through these many changes. It's not always easy. They sometimes are taking on ideas and are influenced by things that may feel uncomfortable to us, but we need to remind them that we support them. Second thing that you need to expect is that you are now establishing a new relationship with somebody that you've known for a very long time. So the longest relationship we have with our kids is adult to adult, and that relationship is just beginning. And you are needing to find out what the rules are, what the habits are, the ways you're going to communicate with this adult. None of this is in place yet. In some ways, you're starting over for the many decades to come. When my kids came home from college for the holidays, it was Thanksgiving, they were often thoughtless and self-absorbed, I will be honest. They trashed the kitchen at 2 a.m. because they never went to bed at a normal time. They wanted to be with their high school friends all the time. They left piles of dirty laundry everywhere. I don't know who they thought was going to do that. But we needed to find some new footing. So my impulse was to go back to my house, my rules. I'm in charge here. I tell you what to do. And it's very tempting to swing into that. But I would caution about that path. And this is somebody cautioning you who's been down that path. We were going forward and not backward. They were becoming adults. And we needed a new way to relate to each other. And the old way, where I made the rules and they were expected to follow them, that ship had sailed. That was gone. So we needed to find ways that we're going to interact that would be the new path for our relationship and would set us up for the rest of our lives together. So one of the things you can expect is have to establish that new relationship with the young adult who the loving and the caring, that's undiminished. But some of the ways that we're going to relate to each other, those need to evolve. Third thing you can expect, at some point, your teen will probably refer to their dorm or to Purdue as home. And at the moment they say this, there may be a sharp intake of breath, and you may think to yourself, that's not home. Home is the place you've lived all your life. Home is the place that your parents are and your siblings are and your pets are. And I'm going to urge you to stop for a moment and realize that when they call Purdue home, this is a reason to rejoice, though it may not feel like it. When your student calls Purdue home, they have made the successful transition to college. There is a place where they feel so comfortable and they feel so connected that place now feels like home also. They have people who mean something to them. They have a sense of belonging. And the dreams that we've had for the last 18 years of our kids going off and having this amazing growth experience in college have now officially come true. So while it might be a little disarming the first time they refer to Purdue as home, we want to just suggest that that's a moment of success.
So the next thing we want to turn to is how parents can help their students find helpful resources on a college campus. Start with talking about getting help as being an important part of being an adult. And we've talked about this academically, for medical needs. It's just really great to normalize that seeking help is what we do as adults. While on campus, make sure that they know all of the Purdue resources around mental and physical health care. And Jen's going to go through all those and give you all a really incredible list of things that you should know about and that they should know about. Talk to your teens about mental health and feelings of isolation, depression, and anxiety. These colleges like Purdue are really equipped to help students through many of these challenges. Going back to the UCLA survey we mentioned earlier, the great majority of students indicated that they felt overwhelmed by all they had to do at college. Now, with great majority, that's 94.5% saying that they felt occasionally or frequently overwhelmed. Almost 65% of students expressed that since they entered college, they have occasionally or frequently felt depressed. So they may need help with these things, or they may not, but it's important that they know where the resources are if they do.
We want to turn to some of the ways that you may think that you may be able to change your relationship with your teen and the way your relationship with your teen is going to evolve. We all love our teens. We want to remain close to them. We want to stay in their lives. We want to see this next stage of their lives and see how it evolves. But we need, as we know, as parents, we need to start letting go. So the best way we think about this, the sort of paradigm that we like to use, is we're moving into the role of a mentor and an advisor. We're starting to become a sounding board, not someone who gives directions. You probably taught your teen to drive, and at the beginning, you probably gave a lot of directions. You were a second set of eyes in that front seat for them because they were very much a novice and didn't know what they were doing and were a danger to themselves and everyone on the road. But as they began to drive and as they got more competency around that, you started letting go. You started telling them less and less to do. That letting go of a teen going to college is very much like the process of teaching them to drive. I know this is easier said than done, but we want to just touch on a few practical ways that parents can successfully transition from a lot of control you may have had over their lives for the last 18 years to less control over their lives and still stay close, supportive, and there for them. That's the goal. The goal is to stay close and supportive, but them to have control over their lives. The first thing we might suggest is not checking their grades. Let them know if you have expectations around grades, or if they have a scholarship or some reason that their GPA needs to stay at a certain level, or if they're going to graduate school. There's a lot of other reasons, jobs, things why they need to monitor their GPA. But then let it go. You may have known, you may have had a system you could have logged into in high school. They may have told you their grades when they came home, if they'd taken a big test or something. It's time to step back a little from that if you can. Maybe you check the grades once a semester. Maybe you just say, here are my expectations of a certain grade level. And if you find that you're not meeting that, we should have a conversation. And then you give the responsibility for the academic achievement to them and hand it to them because that's where it belongs. Second thing, letting go of social media. We find a lot of parents have login credentials and things like that on kids' social media. It's probably time to let that go as well. You've probably spent a lot of time teaching them how best to use social media. You probably had this conversation many times. Of course, the stuff that they're sharing publicly and with friends and with family, of course, that's there for you to see and keep track of their lives. But if you have some control over their social media, you might want to think about this being a time that you let go of that. The third thing we want to suggest is establishing a budget and then leaving them to spend as they see fit. The way they spend their money and the way we spend our money may not be the same thing. You may have bought them a little Keurig so that they can make coffees inexpensively in their dorm room and they're going to Starbucks every day. And that may not have been part of the plan. But if they have a budget and they have a known amount they can spend, it's best to let them spend it and then talk if there are any sorts of troubles of them getting outside their budget. It's like taking the training wheels off. We have to let them ride the bike for a little while, and we're going to remove their training wheels. It's the only way they're going to learn to budget and manage money themselves. It's a tough thing to do around money, particularly when they may not have very much of it to spend, but they need to do some of that learning on their own. Another thing we want to suggest is staying out of their relationship with their roommate. It is so tempting to invest too much in that relationship, but it's their relationship and it's not ours. We run a large Facebook group, and we urge all of you to join us. It's got 270,000 parents from all over the country. It's called Grown and Flown Parents. And often parents go in there and they tell the story of a problem with their freshman student and their roommate. There's a couple of issues here. First of all, you're only hearing one side of the story, and every story, as we know as adults, has multiple sides. Second of all, learning to get along with their roommate, that's practice for learning to get along with classmates and coworkers and bosses and later partners in their own lives. So as part of their adult life, it's super important that we step back from that relationship. If it becomes challenging, we maybe urge them to talk to their RA or reach out to some of the resources that the school offers. But it's super important if we can, and if there's no harm or actual damage being done, that we step back from their relationships with their roommates because they can complain about their roommate one week and then be best friends the next week. And the last thing we suggest parents step back from a little bit is their classes. You may have been very involved in them picking classes and knowing what was going on in their classes, but now it's time for them to take some responsibility for that. Similarly with their extracurriculars. We need to step away from some of these decisions and be there again as their mentor, as their advisor, as their sounding board, always there to listen as a resource, but leaving the decision making to them. Finally, we want to finish saying a word about you. For some of you, this transition may be seamless. You have looked forward to this moment for all of your family's life, and you are justifiably proud of your young person's accomplishment in getting to freshman year at Purdue. And for some of you, the road may be a little more rocky. I'm going to be perfectly honest here with my personal experience, I had to pull over on I-95. Mary Dell and I live in the Northeast. I had to pull over on 95 after I dropped off one of my sons. I was crying so hard. I was both a danger to myself and everyone on the road. I couldn't enter his bedroom for weeks after he left. To be honest, I was not handling this very well, and the feelings, I had not expected to be as overwhelmed by the feelings of his being gone as I was. Whatever you're feeling is normal. Parents feel a whole range of experiences when their kids leave for college. Our best advice around this: plan for when you're going to see them next. It takes some of the sting out of it when you know that you're going to see them maybe at homecoming, which I think for you all is the 29th and 30th of September, or family weekend, or Thanksgiving. When you made the plans and the date that you're going to see them next, it becomes a little easier with missing them. And establish what kind of communication and what frequency is going to work for your family. It may be texts, it may be weekly calls on Zoom, it may be whatever works for your family. But if you establish some of that, it makes it a little easier to say goodbye when you leave them at campus.
So the sharp pain of missing our children, believe it or not, it eventually begins to dissipate as your pride in all that they are doing takes over. This is for most parents. There'll be setbacks. You'll be really sad after they go back after the holidays and sad again next fall. But as you watch them thrive, your pride will tip the balance. You will worry, but try to remember that most students make mistakes, have a few missteps, and ultimately thrive. Our freshmen are adults in training. They're trying out so many things for the first time. It's almost impossible not to worry, but find out what helped you deal with your own anxiety and go there. As Lisa said, a lot of times we just look for a sign of life. My favorite word when my kids were in college was here. I knew that they had arrived back at the dorm at night, or had, both of my kids eventually had cars at school, and when they were driving themselves back, I really needed to know that they got there safely. Remember that this is not 1990 or even 1995. We don't need to have a time to arrange to speak once a week to speak to our teens with an eye on the clock because the rates were going up. My favorite way to communicate with my kids is through an Instagram thread where we're always sharing funny videos or memes or interesting articles. And that actually is a wonderful, great way to know that they're thriving and having fun. I found it so hard to leave my kids because I imagined leaving would be like when I left, when I only spoke to my parents once a week. But of course, that's entirely wrong. Remind yourself that you and your teen are both huge successes and take some pride in that. You have successfully raised a human being to adulthood, which is the hardest task in life. And they have taken this major step into adulthood, and that is momentous. I'm sure that you all know that you realize this is one of the most exciting moments in our kids' lives. It's a moment that may set them off in a new direction. They may be just about to meet some of their best friends in life, maybe even a partner. They may be beginning to learn a subject that will just engage them for the rest of their time at Purdue, if not their entire career. Sure, that it means they're away from us, and daily connection that binds us together is slightly weakened, but we are entering this long and enriched period of knowing our children and loving them as adults, as Lisa talked about earlier. So we congratulate you and thank you for your time tonight. We want to welcome you to visit us over at Grown and Flown. Lisa said the Parents Facebook group is 270,000 members. I'm sure there are a lot of Purdue families in there already. We'd love for you to check in and let us know how you're doing and how your new freshman is doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you both so much for sharing your amazing knowledge with our Boilermaker families and your experiences. Before we wrap things up and I highlight some of our campus resources, we do have a few questions that came in from our families prior to this event. You did touch a lot about some homesicknesses and support. This one kind of dives into that, but just a little bit further. It says, my daughter is struggling with figuring out a long distance relationship with her boyfriend who will be in college in another state. Do you have any insights or tips to share on how to encourage a student to stay on campus and grow in their new college environment when they have a significant other that they're also still trying to stay connected with?
This is both hard and quite common. As many of us may have remembered being in relationships ourselves when we went off to college, I think there are so many different ways for students to get involved in activities at college. Some may have more of a dating component, but others are not at all. If they've got a significant other, they can seek out those activities and organizations that have nothing to do with sort of socializing, and find friends. All they need are friends and to begin to have shared experiences with these new friends, and that will take the sting out of being away from their significant other.
Wonderful. So another one is creating success in college. So we know all of us have this experience that their college life has many distractions from what may have been in high school, and a lot of students will suddenly get a lot more independence. Any suggestions on how to help the teens stay on track to success?
A couple of things we mentioned, planners and paper planners, digital planners, whatever works well for them, as Marydel mentioned earlier. A couple of other things that work well for them. This was the reason the professor who wrote for us said, sit in the front of the room. It's really easy. My kids used to tell me that everybody was online shopping during lectures. Like you could look down and see what everyone was buying in front of you on their laptops during the class. If you sit in the front of the room, you're much more likely to pay attention to the teacher or the professor. The professor's right in front of you. So have your kids find a way to actually physically engage while they're in the classroom. Another thing that many students find works is finding a place to study and always studying in the same place. It can just be the same table in the same library at the same time every day, but creating some sort of habit where when you get to that place, your mind goes to, this is where I work. This is not where I socialize. This is not where I eat. This is where I work. And it becomes habit. You know, we're creatures of habits as humans. And if they create some of those really, really healthy studying habits, it might help them.
Another one we have came in talking about like mental health and anxiety, and I know that you guys have touched on that as well. What are some strategies that you would suggest for families to have to be able to identify signs of anxiety that their student may portray before it starts to spiral?
I think that parents need to be really available to their teens, especially these first few weeks of school. I think listening, as Lisa said, letting them have the opportunity to take out their emotional trash. It is much, much harder. We could tell by the expression on our children's faces when they would come down for breakfast or when they would come home from school as to what kind of night they had had the night before sleeping or what kind of day they'd had at school. And it's really hard to read those tea leaves, I think, when they're not with us. If you can get your kid on a FaceTime, I think that's a big plus because then that gives you a multidimensional way to communicate with them. And obviously, one of the best tricks is to say, when can you FaceTime with the dog? They may say yes to the dog and not to you. But to normalize this activity, to normalize the fact that kids do struggle, especially at the beginning, I think it's really helpful so that they're more inclined to share with you that they're feeling, uncomfortable about things and not that you're going to think that they're not successful by sharing. I think that's super important.
And just remind them, which they know, but we all forget. We're all guilty of this. That the social media that they're seeing going on what kids on other campuses, particularly their high school friends, it is just a tiny window into their friends' lives, and that those friends aren't showing. No one posts pictures sitting alone in their dorm room, in the dark. So just to remind them of that, because they have that extra layer that we didn't have, that makes it particularly challenging.
I completely agree. So the last question we have from one of our families revolves around the time management. So it kind of goes back into that distractions and stuff. So with today's world, how do you suggest the youth navigate all the options to create a healthy balance between successful academic achievement and starting adulthood successfully?
We've talked before during this talk about how many of these things are really intuitive for adults because we've spent our whole lives figuring out how we're going to get to the grocery store and get dinner on the table and run our kids to carpool. We just figure it out. And our kids just think it happens. It's seamless. But I think if we can talk to them about, what kind of systems they're setting up, how are they arranging this new tableau, this new organizational structure that they have, which is so different than high school. Let them tell you what kind of systems they've got in place.
We can also talk to them about our own work life. We have big projects due at work and they're due in a month. And so we make a decision not to go out late on a weeknight because we know we got a big day at work the next week. We can talk through out loud some of those decisions that we quietly make habitually at this point in our lives. You could say something like, you know what, I'm going to the office early. The way I'm looking at my next 2 weeks, I'm going to get the office an hour early the next 3 days because I just have more to get done than I'm going to be able to get done. Just say some of those things out loud so they understand the thinking that goes behind managing time and managing an academic load. In our case, it's a workload, a professional load, not a classroom load. But just tell them how you do it. A little thinking out loud goes a long way in teaching them.
Thank you both so much for all of your wisdom that you have provided, not only in our event today, but also in your Facebook group. It is one of my most favorite groups out there that I still follow from being connected way back when I first started my role in Parent and Family. So thank you all, or thank you both again. We're now going to go into our Purdue resources so that families, we've covered a lot of these in the onboard newsletter transitions throughout the summer. But we're going to also take the time because this is a great time to just remind families of what those are. First off is our Office of the Dean of Students. They're located in Schliemann Hall, which is right in the academic heart of campus next to Memorial Mall. And they are open during normal business hours. And our friends over there, they like to call themselves the Google of Purdue. So we have student support specialists that are there to help your students and for many different aspects. If they are having those time management issues, or needing to talk with somebody because of they're feeling homesick, the Office of the Dean of Students, those student support specialists over there are amazing and are a great ear for our Boilermakers. They have walk-in hours in Schliemann Hall. Students can call ahead and talk to somebody that's on the on-call team. And that team also over in the Dean of Students meet with students who may be in crisis. And so on our website, we also have our Student of Concern report. So we have that information that we can connect families and students to those resources. Another one is our Counseling and Psychological Services Department here at Purdue, also known as CAPS. They have a variety of therapy models for our students. They have staff members, clinicians that are available during the day, and there are after-hour clinicians available if students call the same line that they would call during the day. The WellTrek app has been around for a bit and is a great interactive self-help therapy tool for students just to keep a pulse on where they're at throughout the day. Our CAPS department is located in the Purdue Student Health Center, and their website again is that purdue.edu/CAPS. They have a lot of great resources, even there on their website for our students as they are looking for those throughout the year. Another Purdue University resource is our Purdue University Student Health Department, also known as PUSH. They have various medical services that are available to our students. They hold both Monday through Friday and Saturday hours. And the patient portal can be located on the Purdue PUSH website, purdue.edu/PUSH. They are located on Stadium Mall Drive. And so they are right there in academic campus near the engineering buildings. The Academic Success Center at Purdue is located in Wiley Hall, over near the Wiley Dining Court. They have various offerings for our students for time management skills. They have they have different online resources, in-person resources. So I highly encourage you to check out their website at purdue.edu/ASC. And last but not certainly not least is our students activities and organizations area, SAO at Purdue. So during the first few weeks of classes, many of our various campus activities hold call outs for students to get involved. Those can all be found on the BoilerLink website, so boilerlink.purdue.edu. So if your student is currently on campus for BGR, they'll be able to have opportunities to see students. I saw many of them, or some of them, during move-in holding tabling events already. And so those first few weeks of classes are a great way for students to find something that interests them outside of their academics. So some other things, a stress reliever and whatnot. So if they're unable to find unable to go to one of the call out sessions, all of those contacts are also listed on their BoilerLink landing page. So boilerlink.purdue.edu, your student can type in a couple of keywords or phrases and find all of the fun weight clubs and activities that they can get involved in. Not not to mention one of my favorite, the Pet the Puppy Club. So that one is always a great one on campus. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach us at our helpline, which is boilerfamily@purdue.edu. Also, our website can be found at purdue.edu/parent and family. Thank you all again, and have a great night.